At this time, it's my honor and privilege to introduce the great Kohan Shamil Hawkins.
Shalom. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you, and you may be seated. Everybody knows what book we're in? 13th book of Yisrayl, part 2. Chapter 20. Pastor says in verse 2, "These are exciting times, and the Pope is saying, as Malachi Martin did, that Mary is gonna win out. Bloody Mary, the one spoken of in Jeremiah, if you have a King James Version, Yirmiah, if you have a book of Yahweh." And he says, I believe that's in 44 of Yirmiah, and I'd like to read a little bit about what is in Yirmiah. It's on page, if you got your book of Yahweh, it's 610, I believe. Yirmiah 44, 611. I want to read a few verses. Verse 10. "To this day none are humble, nor show reverence. They have not walked in my law, nor in my statutes that I set before you and your fathers." In verses 15 through 19. "Then all the men who knew that their wives had burned incense to hinder gods, together with all the women who stood by, a great multitude in all, and all the people who lived in the land of Egypt." And that's what I want you to remember. They lived in the land of Egypt. "And they answered Yirmiah, saying, Concerning the word that you have spoken to us in the name of Yahweh, we will not listen to you. Instead, we will certainly do what we have vowed to do. We will burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and pour out drink offerings to her, just as we and our fathers, our kings, our princes, used to do in the cities of Yada and in the streets of Jerusalem." You can see that this Bloody Mary worship was even all over Jerusalem. As you read these scriptures, we need to remember the things that Pastor's been telling us. It's talking about making money. Everything is about money in this beastly system. And we need to be cautious. There's nothing inherently wrong with making money, but we need to see and keep in check our motives and our motivation. So, these sins, this worship of the goddess, the mother, the Queen of Heaven, and Bloody Mary, was in the streets, in the cities of Yada and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of food. We were successful and experienced no trouble. They were wealthy. And if you remember in Scripture, Yahweh says He calls those that aren't necessarily wealthy. Right? Verse 18. "But since we stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything and have been consumed by the sword and by famine." So now they're not only rebelling against the prophet, they're blaming Yahweh for the curses that are coming upon them for their own sins, their own choices that they've made. It's bad enough that you're going to tell Yirmiah that, no, we're not going to listen to you. But to blame Yahweh for everything that's going wrong in their lives? And as you read verse 19, the women are coming back. They're defending their husbands. And they're saying, well, our husbands knew what we were doing the whole time we did it. Isn't this the same thing when Moshe was taking the children of Israel out of Egypt? Weren't they complaining about the same thing? Oh, why'd you bring us out here in the wilderness to die? At least we had a pot of food over there in Egypt. And, all those murmurings and gripes and complaints. all of these things, Yahweh is letting us see that there's difficulty in coming into the house of Yahweh. It doesn't mean everybody isn't going to be able to have a job, but it means some are going to have jobs that don't pay the big bucks. And I would that everybody would consider how we think about one another. Whoever it is that we think is the lowliest in the house of Yahweh, we need to really, really consider why. Do we measure a man's worth by the amount of money that's in his bank account? Or how many small engines or big engines he's got to keep running every day? We don't want to have the same attitude, because when times get tough, if we're not ready, we could fall to this same kind of trap. And someone could be able to tell pastor, we will not listen to you. That would be devastating. Look at verse 16 in this same chapter. But this gathering, if you look in Revelation 7, you see this gathering that Yahweh is going to put together. He's putting it together now, in fact. We've been reaching them for quite some time, but he's actually in advance now. Thousands of years ago, he marked these people. Now I know that seems impossible, but he did. He marked these people like he marked you and got you ready to call to his house. He did certain things that when you heard the words, you came. Like the prophecy that says, in that time period, I will raise up to David. I will raise up to David. You know, that's in Revelation 7. That's on page 976. I want to just read a few of these verses, because what he's talking about there is let me get to the right page here. Praise Yahweh. That multitude that's going to come through the Great Tribulation. Remember the 2 billion we keep hearing about? They're being prepared to come. That gene hasn't been turned on quite yet. There's some responding, but it hasn't grown enough. It hasn't gotten to the point where they're showing up at the front gate yet. Some of us maybe responded to that calling in a day, the same day we heard pastor's voice on the radio or the TV or wherever it may be, or the first time we read a free booklet. Maybe we ran to the house of Yahweh, or at least called. But some, I know I've talked with some of you, some it took 2.5 years. I remember one man that I was speaking with, he said, oh, I've been knowing about the house of Yahweh for 10 years. And I said, what do you mean knowing about the house of Yahweh? Oh, you know, I had the free booklets and I'd been reading them. And I asked him, what took you so long? 10 years. I didn't mean it in a negative or a derogatory way. I wanted to understand, how could you read this material for 10 years before you did anything with it? Those people are being prepared. They were called, they were selected, not called, selected when you and I were, when Pastor was, when Yeshua was, when Yeremiah and Yachanan the Revelator was. It just isn't their time yet. Everything in Yahweh's time. He's giving us an opportunity to become the best teachers, the greatest teachers that will ever be, so that we can teach the greatest teachers as well. We don't have a minute to lose or a minute to waste. We have just enough time to get everything out of us that needs to be out of us, and everything in us that needs to be in us. So when we think we have some idle time, maybe we could think about this gathering that's taking place. Could it be one of the classes that you're one of the teachers that Yahweh uses to go out across the world that clicks in somebody's genes? That'd be pretty amazing. We might be able to find that out someday. We probably won't find out too soon, but maybe after the change. Because before the change, we might get a little proud. So you see, there's still a lot of things we can work on. And pastors got it all in these books. This great tribulation, when sin is at its peak, that's where we are right now. Every time we see the news on Sabbath, you can see sin is at its peak. Well, maybe it's just got a little bit left to go, but it's pretty bad. These books of Yisrayl are amazing, especially with the Yisrael Says program. Any subject we want to bring a speech on, we want to contemplate, meditate on, we can find it right there. I know I was looking up something this afternoon. I was looking for a very specific thing Pastor said, and I could only think of a couple of words. I wound up not finding it because I think it hit on 1,352 times that Pastor said what I was looking for. I didn't have time enough to go and find the one that I was looking for. But it's there. Any subject we can think of. The young children, I know in workshop today we talked about it. Something, because I see children in here, and I want to remind the parents. We are all called out, us adults. We're all called out. We need to be cautious of how we think about the children. Just because they're born in the house of Yahweh, does that make them called? We need to remember that. We need to feed them in righteousness, example in every other way. But we need to remember that they someday will have a choice. And we're building up the decision that will help them make that choice every minute of every day we're with them. Praise Yahweh. So praise Yahweh for the parents. I'm not saying anybody's doing it wrong or anything wrong. But a lot of times, and I'll use my old wore-out phrase, we're too busy being busy. And we may not think about that when a son or a daughter asks a question and we rush them off, or whatever the case may be. Even if we're watching the little ones and they need to go to the bathroom and we roll our eyes, not again, I just asked you, we just got back, whatever. I remember some of those things. We need to remember what we're planting in the hearts and in the minds of those children. Because this gathering is taking place. And if those children haven't made that choice, we want to make sure we give them every opportunity to make the correct, what we say is the correct choice, Choose life, not death. Look at verse 19. That's what I see coming forth in our young children now. Let me back up to 18. Well, anyway, here we see this great gathering taking place of 12 tribes who were marked. Also marked in the same way, and of course, to be called. And certain things being put in their bloodline. Well, why didn't? Isn't it unfair for him to mark some and not others? No. The ones that refused it, they refused it on their own. And that bloodline was never killed out or destroyed. It was let run. But the ones that did accept it, like Abraham, and proved that he would, under extremes, keep the laws of Yahweh, or keep whatever Yahweh told him to do, he would actually do it. And Pastor goes on to say, that's what I see coming forth in our young children now. That's awesome. Pastor's saying he can see the righteousness of Abraham in the children in the house of Yahweh today. They have set their minds. They've set their minds and hearts to totally overcome. Those children can encourage each one of us adults when we watch them. When we see the sons of Yisrayl get up here and pray and bring a short sermon, it's encouraging. It's amazing to see what Yahweh has done with the children in the house of Yahweh. I know some of us remember some of the sons of Yisrael when they were 3 and 4 years old. And now look at them. And that's the second generation. They were born in the house. It's the second generation. Look at what they've learned in their short lives and how they've learned to use it. Now think about their children, the third generation, then the fourth generation. It's going to be a sight I don't think we can even begin to imagine. I hear that pastor says, I hear their confessions. I know what's in their hearts, and I can see how they're overcoming. They're setting their minds to do righteousness, and they're setting their minds that they're not going to let their head be turned again. And they may slip up, but they repent, and they set their minds again. And that's exactly what the prophet Samuel did. That's what David did. That's what all of the men of old, the righteous prophets, did. It's what all of us do every time we realize there's a shortcoming within us. We practice righteousness. We don't practice sin. We mess up from time to time. Yahweh willing, it's not willful. It's a mistake. Think about when you first came to the house of Yahweh, and think about yourself now. You're not even the same person. Why? Because the one sent taught us how to walk and talk and dress and breathe and brush our teeth and what to eat, and taught us everything. We don't have anything to be well pleased with ourselves about, really, because everything that we have today was given to us by the one sent. Praise Yahweh. Yahweh gave us what we are today. It wasn't a joke that he called us out. He knew we could make it. He knew we could make it, or he never would have called us into his house. He put everything within us that we need to overcome. Everything. We just have to do it. Be determined. Follow the desire to do righteousness and not the desire to sin. You know, we get to watch. I'm talking about verse 21. I'm jumping from 19 to 21. We get to watch the sermons. You get to see them. And we see all the shapes and the faces and things in the clouds or in the waves or wherever else it might be. And it shows us prophecies are being fulfilled. We get to watch the news. That shows us that prophecy is being fulfilled as well. We're not just getting to watch the news so we don't watch TV. Each one of those news stories that we're being told, a great Kohan comes up here and tells us what to look for so that we see the prophecy being fulfilled. That strengthens us more than we could ever realize, more than we could ever know. We've been warned since we came to the house of Yahweh, times are going to get difficult. That's probably not all that far away. But there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to be concerned about. Seeing those prophecies being fulfilled reveal to us just how much of control Yahweh has. If Yahweh can make pastors' face from 1968 show up on a cloud Maybe my ear is off, but you get my point. He's in control. There's nothing that Yahweh is not in control of. That's why we can't hide from him our sins. We can't hide. There's nowhere to go where he doesn't know what his microorganisms that make us up are doing or what we've done to them. You know, where's your brother Abel? His blood is crying out to me from the ground. Can't even hide in the ground. Remember that the prophecies help strengthen us. The more that we understand those prophecies and understand that they're coming to pass now, the stronger our faith will be and the more confidence in Yahweh we'll have. That's a lot of mercy Yahweh has for us. A lot of love and compassion and empathy. Yahweh doesn't leave us alone. He takes care of us if we allow him. Parents, you can think about it. Sometimes a son gets to that age where, let me do it, Dad. I can do it. I don't need your help. And, you know, it's nerve-wracking sometimes because maybe it's a little more dangerous than, you know, you'd really want him to do by himself. But, you know, run a chainsaw or something. And he's only 6. But look at what Yahweh does. I'm not telling everybody to let a 6-year-old take a chainsaw. Now, that is not what I said. But think about what we have control of. And as a father, that would be pretty spooky, wouldn't you think? No matter how young or old we are. Yahweh's in control. We need to understand that. We need to really realize that we're a part of Yahweh's plan to be in unity with his body, with this house, to build it in righteousness, to love Yahweh's laws, to be the holiest of the holy people, to bring forth that holy seed. We need to remember that. We need to think about that. There's times that sometimes, like I said earlier, we're too busy being busy. We just don't stop and think about those things that we thought about when we first came to the house of Yahweh. Those are encouraging things. I was an idiot, but I thought I knew everything. But then really learned real quick I didn't know anything. And just think about, in comparison to Pastor, we know so little compared to what he knows. We'll never catch up. And if you compare that with Pastor and Yeshua, he knows so much, Pastor won't ever catch up. And with Yeshua to Yahweh, we shouldn't worry about catching up with one another or passing somebody else up. That's not what we need to be concerned with. We need to be able to trust Yahweh enough that we can endure whatever's coming in this great tribulation. He's given us everything we need to be able to endure through that. Everything. We will be short in nothing unless we say we will not listen. You know, Pastor talks about in verse 26, he talks about the last 7 plagues will completely overshadow what Moshe did, and we're going to be talked about throughout all eternity. This last day's work will be talked about throughout all eternity. Greater than what we think Abraham may have done, or what Moshe may have done, or what any of the other groups of the house of Yahweh have ever done. They're going to talk about this group. The last will be first, and the first will be last. That is a tremendous honor to have been born in this generation, each one of us, born in this generation, so we can be a part of that glorifying of Father Yahweh. We could have been born any other time. Maybe in the year 1900 or 1897, and we'd have been long gone by the time the House of Yahweh was established. But Yahweh saw fit. It pleased Him to bring each one of us here at this time. Never be concerned why you're here. Learn all that you can learn so that you can teach what you've learned. What's causing the separation? This is referencing verse 41 in this same chapter. What's causing the separation and disagreement in the world today? It's people wanting their own way instead of Yahweh's way. So that's worldly, right? I mean, that's kind of a definition of what's worldly. Why would we bring that into the house of Yahweh? Oh, I want to do it my way. I can remember there was a priest. I don't think he's used this phrase recently, but he used to always remind us, it's Yahweh's way or the highway. And it's not because we're going to get kicked out. It's because we're going to lose so much understanding, we're going to kick ourselves out and wonder why we ever came in the first place. And we've all seen that take place. Except maybe some of the children, and praise Yahweh for that. Every one of you is a special son of Yahweh, hand-chosen, hand-selected. For all generations, Yahweh followed your genetics, your DNA, to make sure you would be born at a very certain specific time, that you would be called out, something, that little switch in the genes would be flipped at a very certain time to be in this house of Yahweh, established in these the last days, at the worst possible time that it could be done, but really at the best possible time that it could be done. Never wonder why you're here. You're here for a purpose. To learn how to teach the way of peace to everything that Yahweh ever created. To bring peace where there is no peace. And think about how much it took to get us to practice peace when we first got here. We thought we knew what peace was. We didn't treat one another like we did. But there's such a tremendous growth in each one of you, it's easy to see the righteousness that you practice. Encourage one another. Always lift up one another. Never, ever take a moment to put a brother down. Not even in your own mind. It hurts you more than it'll hurt the brother when you say it. Keep reading, keep coming to the classes, keep reading, keep studying. Don't be late for any of the classes or the services, because you're going to miss something. I don't know what it'll be, but don't miss anything. And if you'll all please stand, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you the great Kohan Ilya Hawkins.
Shalom, great sons of Yisrayl. You may be seated. A great high honor to come before you. Yahweh's called out ones. You know, Gregorian Shamil was just talking about your calling, and we're going to see some of that. This is a really great sermon, and in light with the information we're getting during the feast, it's awesome. It's like another light bulb going off, being in Yahweh's house yet again. No, Yeshua said in Yachanan 6:44, no man can come to me unless the Father who has sent me draws him. We're learning a whole lot more about that drawing this feast. And Pastor was surely elaborating on that in this sermon. Now we're going to continue in this 13th book of Israel, part 2. If you look down on page 227, down to verse 46, that's where we're going to begin. Pastor says here, it says, verse 2, in his days, that is, the branch and the king Yeshua Messiah and Yahweh's branch. In his days, Yada would be saved. Yes, salvation will actually go. And in fact, Revelation says, now is salvation. And that is because the house of Yahweh is established. So salvation, the way to salvation is now being taught. And it's only taught in this time period. As we'll see, Pastor makes some comments here about Billy Graham. Continuing verse 47, he says, all of this work, if you could think about it, is for the 6,000-year plan of Yahweh, the perfect plan of Yahweh, and all of the work for 6,000 years. Now he breaks off here and says that now Billy Graham saved millions of souls, he thought. The Million Soul Campaign, I remember this well, but he wasn't saving anyone. Salvation wasn't even offered at that time. Salvation was offered at the beginning. At the beginning with Adam and Eve, and it was refused. And then it was cut off. Now, interesting. At the beginning it was offered. It was cut off. But now here at the end, now is the time of salvation. So how did it get from the beginning to here? We'll see that a little clearer here shortly. Verse 48. But he set 7 works to guard that and bring that perfect way of life down through 7 works. That's why it's so important that we too guard it in our own individual lives and in our households. Because we're also protecting these righteous genes as well that was passed down to us. But he sent 7 works to guard that and bring that perfect way of life down through 7 works, so those seeds would always be planted here and there throughout the 6,000-year generations. Yahweh's plan was to plant these righteous genes, in ways in which Satan couldn't destroy them. Because he knew in the last days he was going to establish this house. And he can't establish it out of thin air. You can't establish it solely out of God worship. It would be from righteous genes that was passed down. Look down to verse 50. We'll skip down there. Well, that's what comes forth from the majority of mankind. And Yahweh said, fine, take it, go with it. I will allow it, and I'll show you what your end will be. And this is exactly what Pastor was showing the world. He's warning the world this right now. So he prophesied and sent his prophets and warned the nations over and over and over, and that's our job. And no one does it like Israel Hawkins. The key is, do we assist him? Do we support him? Do we uplift him? This is what you're bringing upon yourself, and they will grow totally worse. All the time, he said, you're going to be sick from the top of your head to the sole of your feet. We see it in every news broadcast. We see it in the prophetic words. Yahweh has surely lifted it up, where it's very clear to us, and we're warning the world of it. Pastor said he would warn the world of it as he saw these plagues coming. He says, well, now, we're down to the end, where we're sick from the top of our head to the sole of our feet, totally. No baby is born sound today. Every baby has a defect. They're born with it. It's impossible for them not to be. Some more, some less. Some so bad they die in a few days or a few hours. I remember some peaceful solution classes taking some articles to some of the men and in showing them all these diseases. I remember meningitis, and I didn't bring them for this class, but I remember meningitis, shingles. And I showed these men how these were STDs. And they were just flat, they were just floored by it. Of course, I let them know that didn't come from me. It came from this great place here. So don't think that I was someone special. It's just that this program is one that lifts up the truth to people. Of course, they were attending the Peaceful Solution. We weren't talking religion. But if you haven't looked into those things for yourself, look into it. It's not hard. Look up shingles. Notice the bacteria it comes from. If you find it different, you can come talk to me. But you won't. You'll see exactly that it's an STD. You'll see it. All these diseases is just like Pastor has said. They're caused by us sinning, brethren. We followed Satan's way. Mankind did. We've repented of it. But continuing, it says, every baby has a defect. They're born with it. It's impossible for them not to be. Some more, some less. Some so bad they die in a few days or a few hours. And that's what the world is getting. And I'm saying because the scripture says they're going to multiply quickly now. And the plagues that you see, only the house of Yahweh is capable of stopping them. That's you and me. We're the only ones on the planet that know how to stop these plagues. Now remember that when you're representing the house of Yahweh or the peaceful solution out in the world. You hold confidence in the words of Yahweh's last day's witness, and it gives you great strength to talk to people. In unity, of course, with Yahweh's great house. Don't go outside the unity now as we're speaking to people. It's easy to fall into a trap like Genesis chapter 3. Look at verse 52. Please look at these words. These three words. We need help. This is not a pity. We need help, Pastor says. We need our 2 billion people to work with us, and we could stop these plagues, and the world could live. Now, so if we do our part, the conversion fully, completely, we continue warning the world and get that 2 billion here. So that means we can't withdraw now. We can't sit in the easy chair and get on the couch and stop in this last hour of putting forth the effort to help promote the work of Yahweh. If you're not involved with the reach out, get with Great Kohan Anaya. You want to get involved with pushing the peaceful solution? Speak with Great Kohan, the greater Kohan Elia. Go to the North Office, ask, how can I help? Because we have a work to push forward. The Catholic Church is not coming down because by itself, per se. The teachings from the house of Yahweh is what's bringing it down, brother. But Pastor says we need help. We need our 2 billion people to work with us. Can't you see? You saw Yahweh's daughters teaching today. You see, we're getting ready. I wonder if we're about ready for those 2 billion right now. Some of Yahweh's youngest teachers are spotless, they look. And they strongly trust in everything that comes from Yahweh's house. We could stop these plagues and the world could live. Aren't we tired of seeing what we see on the news? I mean, do we really hate sin and the result of sin? I mean, I know we're in the protected place, but this isn't just for us. Yahweh has a plan to save his people, but it's to save the whole universe. Restorers of the breach. We should want to see, we should have compassion, just like Yeshua had compassion on the world. It didn't mean that we should be Christian. We should not want to see a child born and die a few hours later. Look over to verse 62. We'll pick up from there on page 229. Anyway, Pastor says, I brought the first sermon last week, and those who missed it, shouldn't be any of us missing it, now that Yahweh's got it where the whole world can see it, but in those who missed it, need to get it. It's very important that you stay up on this right here. He says this is going to be a spectacular thing, so it's not going to be small time. Not at all. What we're seeing here, there's a lot of deaths that are going to take place in the world. What did we hear today from the women? 108 deaths a minute? And it's going to get worse than this. You know, and the world is just not focused on these things, brethren. It's you remember the young man that shot some people in the church? Okay, it's the city I live in, and everyone in that city talks about that shooting of those 9 people. There's 108 deaths a minute taking place around the world. Yes, those nine people were important, but how about all those other people? I believe a person. It's been a while since I've looked at the Chicago shot clock. I don't know if any of you ever get an opportunity to look at that. But you can pull that up online. And it shows how a person is shot at just in Chicago every 3 minutes and something. And we're just concerned about a shooting in one place or just one school. Pastor says there's a lot of deaths that are going to take place in the world. The misery is going to get so great, they won't be able to stand it. And they are bringing it on themselves. No, Yahweh isn't bringing it on them. They're bringing it on themselves. They have been ever since Yahweh sent Isaiah. Even before Isaiah, there were other prophets who warned them too, just like Pastor is warning in these last days. Down to verse 65. Well, where do you find God worship? Pastor says, look at Genesis 3. Follow the pattern of sin mixed with righteousness, the tree of righteousness and evil. That's that God worship. Yahweh put the perfect pattern of peace in the tree in the garden and offered it to mankind, and they refused. And this is the same trick when we stupidly refuse. They refused because Satan said, go ahead and sin and you'll be like the gods. I'll go ahead and sin. It doesn't matter. You can still show up to the feast and smile. Let me share with you men something. Speaking of genes, I got to be careful. I was very blessed to call our overseer. And I had to call him in concerning some counseling situations. And one of those situations was the sin of fornication. And before he could even say anything, he already had another call. He had to put me on hold. And he got back on the phone, and he gave me such a warm greeting. Wow. But he got back to talking again, got another call. So when he got back on the phone again, I got to finally tell him, well, Pastor, I'm calling to report a situation. And Here's what the situation was, and it involved fornication and so forth. His demeanor changed. He greeted me lovely. Cornelius Matthews. Oh, wow. I still can't do it without acting like a baby, you know. But when he heard of that situation, his whole demeanor changed. And he wanted to know, what are they doing? What sermons are they listening to? I brought many sermons on this topic. We're too late in the game to be committing these sins, to alter these righteous genes. We're destroying them. That sin does not stop with that man and that woman, because it gets passed down, right? Goes right along with this sermon. Right into the children. Though I enjoyed talking to Pastor for 20 minutes, I got a straight fire sermon from him. You might as well call it that. It was beautiful. It was very beautiful. And it's sticking in my mind, and Yahweh willing, it'll stick in your beautiful minds as well. Okay. Speaking of Pastor, let's see here. Well, down to verse 65, if I didn't already read that. Well, where do you find God worship? Look at Genesis 3. Follow the pattern of sin mixed with righteousness, the tree of righteousness and evil. It said Yahweh put the perfect pattern of peace in the tree, in the garden, and offered it to mankind. And they refused because Satan said, go ahead and sin. Go ahead, commit fornication. Go ahead, look at television. Go ahead and lust after these gods, so then you'll go out and do something foolish and ruin your salvation. This will be better than your salvation anyway. Who cares about salvation? Look at the rest of the world. They're not religious. And even if they are, they're hypocrites. You men don't need that. You don't want that. Here's what you want. Here, look at your cell phone. I'll send you an advertisement with it. I'll find a way to trigger it for you. What do you like, books? Okay, we'll go to the bookstore. I'll have some woman offer you the books. With very soft fingers as she's showing you the book. Continuing here, he said, yeah, and offered it to mankind, and they refused because Satan said, go ahead and sin, and you'll be like the gods. Samuel said, and this is very important with unity. I want to make sure I make this point. This is very important. We're going to see an extreme importance of why we need to be in unity with Yahweh right here in just a moment. Samuel said, put away this God worship. This is what's bringing you war. This is why you have war. See, we're the only ones that know that. That's why the world has it. Right? Put away this God worship. This is the only reason you have in war right now. And Samuel, after they all repented, Samuel turned to Yahweh and said, okay, I've got them all back in line again. I've got them all back in unity again. Now watch. Read, please, if you have it. Read the next sentences, please. Yahweh fought their battle for them. You see, if we're all in unity with the House of Yahweh, with Israel Hawkins, Yahweh will fight our battles. I don't know how many men is in this room now, 100, 200, whatever. We couldn't fight Abilene Police Force. We couldn't fight, let alone an army. We surely can't beat Satan. We need Yahweh to fight our battles. Don't think of it just in our own individual lives. I'm talking about for the work of Yahweh. You've seen the news reports. You see what the Catholic Church has at their disposal to use the slander of the work. Which one of us can stop that as individuals, as groups of 10? You see, only Yahweh. And we must be in unity with Yahweh or we are hurting our defense. You think if the children of Israel didn't follow Yahweh and in unity and march around Jericho that those walls would have came down? Of course not. Yahweh fought their battle for them. They didn't even have to lift the sword. They didn't have to. You don't have to, praise Yahweh. When the army was chasing the 3 million Israelites, the house of the man Israel, when they were chasing him through the sea, trying to catch up with him and stop them and bring them back because Pharaoh's heart was hardened again, they didn't have to lift a hand. All they had to do was trust Yahweh like Moshe told them. Just see what Yahweh will do for you. And they saw all this, brethren. And we've seen a lot of things in these last days too. Many of us came here half dead and now are alive. But notice here now, Pastor is saying, just see what Yahweh will do for you. And they saw all this, but yet they wanted a king to fight their battles for them. And that reminds me of these beautiful supplements and instructions and cleanses we get from Yahweh's house and real salt. And then we allow a doctor to tell us, no, don't eat that salt. I've heard that many times. Oh, come on, the doctor says I can't take the salt. Trust Yahweh. Look up the information. It's already been brought. And you'll see that it may not affect you in a negative way. Matter of fact, real salt doesn't. But that doctor surely does. And we want to go back to them and we want to trust in them. And then, of course, we want kings over us in other ways too sometimes. We believe the media. And the media will they just recently call these men dictators over these countries. And if we're not careful, we can be sympathetic to that news broadcast and think, well, yeah, I think the United States should go in there and kill those people. No, we don't need to fight battles. We don't need to lift a hand at it. We want Yahweh to win all the battles, to fight all the battles. We'll practice righteousness and pass it on down through the lineage, brethren, and build this great kingdom. Let's see. Over to page 231 on verse 76 here. Verse 10 it says, for the land is full of adulterers, those who turn from following Yahweh to following the gods, the Elohim. Because of this curse, Pastor says, curse? That's what we see in plagues. Plagues are curses. And they are called, as they are called in Exodus, when Moshe brought them on the land of Egypt. Because of this curse that you've brought on yourselves, now you're going to see these 7 plagues that Yahweh named. And they will be strong, and I'll be naming them as Pastor says. Look over to verse 91 on page 232. In Micaiah 4:1, you know this scripture, brethren. Listen at it yet again. But in the last days, it'll come to pass that the mountain, the promotion of the house of Yahweh, are you part of that promotion of it? Are you pushing it? You paying your tithes, your offerings? It's third tithe year. Pay it. Pay it with joy, with love. Okay? Of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations. That's a miracle right there, and you're proof of that miracle. It will be raised above all congregations. But listen to this part, don't forget, and all people will eventually flow to it. We got to do the work. Pastor isn't the only one in the house of Yahweh, you know. He's the head, he's the leader. But we have to support him. And not in our own way. Too many times it's, I can do this, or I'll do it this. Hey, how about this? I do this. I do this. This. instead of how can I help? How can I assist? You know, you men, you're heads of families in Yahweh's house. So I beg you, go to the north office. Ask. Verse 96. If you'll repent right now, this is on the page 233. Pastor says, if you'll repent right now, Francis, we could stop this. The house of Yahweh can stop it. We're the only ones on the face of the earth who know how. And we could stop these plagues from coming on the world. Plagues that you can see coming right now if you just look around you. If you just pay attention to the news. The pastor says, but he knows that we see them. Before we close, I want to remind you of something you know very well in Revelation chapter 3. And listen to this again, brethren. Of course, this is to the Malach of the congregation. Chapter 3, verse 7 in Revelation. Of the house of Yahweh in Philadelphia. Down to verse 8. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door. Remember, if we're in unity with Yahweh, Yahweh fights our battles. This open door will be clear. We'll move forward. We can do many, many things, brethren. Nothing is impossible with Yahweh. Look what we're already doing. And no man can shut it. He won't allow it. Because he'll be fighting the battle. For you have a little strength, and have kept my word, and have not denied my name, have not perverted the righteous genes that I've allowed to be passed down in my plan. I scattered them all around in generations so they would be passed down to you. So you would answer this calling to come to Yahweh's great house. Down to verse 10, because you have kept the word of my patience, I will also keep you. Remember that word keep also means protect? Which one of us can protect ourselves? We can't protect ourselves from a car on a highway, hardly. So we have this great opportunity, brother, to continue to nourish this righteousness. Let's work hard to get sin totally out of our lives. Let's work hard to support this work. Now, not just with lips. Not just with lips. And it's just like one of the sisters said today. She hit on a key one, didn't she? With our free time, too.